Now on BBC Two Newsnight.
The minister accused of trying to nobble the Cash for Questions inquiry says he made a mistake, but he's told his explanation doesn't add up.
Either you were deceiving your colleagues in the initial memorandum you wrote, or you are trying to deceive this committee now in the subsequent memorandum.
Good evening. The government whip accused of trying to influence a parliamentary investigation into allegations of sleaze said tonight that everyone had got the wrong end of the stick. Could the man sometimes called the cleverest minister in government really have been so unclear? A member of the Nolan Committee and the editor of The Guardian debate whether today's hearing shows Parliament is capable of policing itself. Also, the Prime Minister is threatening to torpedo a new treaty on Europe's future if the European Court rules tomorrow that Britain must implement a maximum 48-hour working week. I'll be asking the Trade Secretary whether the government can justify such a response to a ruling by a court whose powers we signed up to over 20 years ago. And the Shadow Foreign Secretary joins us to explain his party's new promises to business. Fish in our rivers are changing sex. Could the decline in human male fertility have something to do not with the birth control pill, but with naturally occurring hormones in women? And when foxes come from the bottom of the garden and bite a 5-month-old baby, is it time to stop encouraging the return of the urban fox? The tide of sleaze allegations, which the government hoped to have put behind it, flooded back again tonight. Two senior members of the Conservative Party, David Willetts and Sir Geoffrey Johnson-Smith, appeared before the House of Commons Standards Committee to explain whether or not a whip had tried to influence the parliamentary committee investigating the Cash for Questions scandal. At the time, Sir Geoffrey was chairman of that committee and David Willetts a government whip. The evidence took so long that the committee ended up adjourning for a week. David Willetts' defence came down to whether or not Sir Geoffrey appreciated who he was talking to and whether Mr Willetts wrote his memo in 18th century phraseology. Mark Mardell reports.
Like football, politics is intensely tribal, confrontational, one side pitted against the other, using every opportunity to get the better of the other team to break through and score a goal. But when politicians are accused of committing a foul, fellow players in the game are expected to stand aside and pass judgment. The players here, Sir Geoffrey Johnson-Smith, the Conservative chairman of the committee, which was expected to investigate the alleged misconduct of then Minister Neil Hamilton, and the then whip, David Willetts, who's accused of trying to persuade Sir Geoffrey to minimise the embarrassment of the affair to the party and the government. Both men deny that happened.
No one from the government, and Mr Willetts certainly wasn't pressurising me, nor the Chief Whip or anybody. I'm bound to say that there are those aspects of the House of Commons which, despite the criticisms that are made of us from time to time, members behave very well to one another in this respect. They know it's not just bad form, they run an awful risk of a lot of trouble and complaint from me if they try to twist my arm.
It certainly would have been wrong to try to influence him, and I did not seek to influence him or put pressure on the committee.
Much centres on the Willetts memorandum, handwritten notes in the whip's little book of his conversation with the committee chairman, Sir Geoffrey Johnson-Smith. Mr Willetts wrote he could, 1, argue now sub judice, get committee to set it aside, or 2, investigate it as quickly as possible, exploiting good Tory majority at present. We were inclined to go for 1, but he wants our advice. The committee did indeed take option 1, but Sir Geoffrey told today's committee that the conversation was brief. He quite probably didn't realise Mr Willetts was a whip and thought the memo's interpretation was inaccurate.
Yes, I do think it's astonishing. I think you're quite right. And I think we'd better ask Mr Willetts that, if I may suggest that. I don't think I can add anything to the simple fact, Mr Chairman. There's no problem. I don't need advice in that respect.
Mr Willetts, who's now Paymaster General, said Sir Geoffrey did not seek advice, he did not offer any. So what, committee members wondered, did his memo mean?
So the words "he wants" are incorrect.
They mean he is in want of advice, he needs advice. I thought that the position was left open-ended and that he needed advice.
A couple of Conservatives tried to be helpful, but another, Quentin Davis, thought this absurd. He ripped into Mr Willits.
You say, Mr Willits, you didn't falsify and you didn't invent, but just take a look at the first line of the next paragraph. I also referred to exploiting a good Tory majority. You did indeed, in Willits 1, refer to exploiting a good Tory majority, but you now say that Sir Geoffrey did not use such words. In other words, those words were words of your invention, quite literally so.
Yes, Sir Geoffrey did not use those words. Those are my words.
Well, that's not imposing artificial structure, Mr Willits. That's just a prevaricating phrase, isn't it? That's inventing something. It's actually composing words which were not told you by Sir Geoffrey.
He certainly did not use those words.
Yes, that's an invention, and it's your invention.
They're my words, not his words.
Exactly, and whatever is expected of a whip, whether or not a whip is merely expected to record what a colleague said, a whip is not expected to invent what a colleague said, is he?
Mr Davis was like a dog with a rat. He wouldn't let go.
So we have to come to the conclusion, do we not, Mr Willits, that either you were deceiving your colleagues in the initial memorandum you wrote, or you are trying to deceive this committee now in the subsequent memorandum you wrote, and there are no two ways about it. The question really is, which of these two should we believe, or possibly both of them might be untrue, but what is logically impossible is that both of them should be the truth, is it not?
No, I explain in my memorandum to this committee, the circumstances of the events of 2 years ago.
In the end, it took the chairman, the cabinet minister, to call him off.
Quentin, very reluctant to intervene, but you'll sense that some of your colleagues feel that this line of questioning has gone as far as it usefully can.
This has been rough stuff, but can the public ever trust MPs to be impartial? It might stretch integrity to breaking point if there was no independent referee and footballers had to go into a huddle to decide themselves whether their teammates had committed a foul. Team managers, just like party managers, might not be able to keep their thoughts to themselves if impartiality was going to damage their chance of victory. But this is the political players' last chance to demonstrate that they can resist rigging the outcome to help their team.
Mark Mardell reporting. We're joined now by Alan Rusbridger, the editor of The Guardian, and by Tom King, who sat on the Nolan Committee responsible for setting up today's committee, the first hearing of which was televised there. Now, Mr Rusbridger, you were responsible for all of this in a sense. It's quite clear, isn't it, from however entertaining it may be to see Quentin Davis cross-examining David Willits, that actually we're talking about very small beer.
Well, it depends whether you believe Mr Willits or Sir Geoffrey today. Mr Quentin Davis clearly didn't believe him. He clearly believed that there was an attempt to influence the committee. But in a sense, this was 3.5 hours spent squabbling about 88 words, and there are much larger issues involved in the Hamilton affair.
Did you think that it served its purpose of going